and then take them all.
JJ?
Then. Cold bore. Hi, JJ. Hey, welcome back. A cold bore shot. Now, so I have a target. I haven't done it yet.
Good morning to you.
Now I made a target that's just gonna be my cold bore shot on my. I'll do it, I'll put one round if I have to clean the bear, but I haven't. So it's clean now, but I'm like, dirty. It's cold. That one too. That's harder thing. Then I'll find out the thing and then I'll just grab that one. First shot you shoot.
When did you get back to Minnesota?
That was Sunday night. Oh, more of everything. Just recently. Late. If you like, say you were shooting and you dial it in and it's kind of warm. It'll move, it won't move much.
Yeah.
But when you're threading between trees, it's enough.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So I'm gonna do that for the ones I use for you.
Yeah.
And it's simple to do.
Shoot, man. You see that shed that guy found in Anoka County? You're deep, huh? Oh, I think so. Yeah, yeah. That thing is freaking huge. I had to take a picture of it later.
How you doing today?
Just that, side was 102 inches. But can't even reach around it.
So, I learned something.
No. I can tell you where he's.
A week ago, my wife and I were over to visit Kurt and Kathy Triggerstead.
Oh, yeah.
I did not know that there's a relative connection there. I never knew that.
My son-in-law is Kathy's
Yeah,
daughter.
yeah. Yeah. Oh,
I
okay.
didn't realize,
And
you had a connection with them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
They're good people. I feel bad for Kurt. He worked his whole life.
Yeah.
Did really, really well and
Yeah, I
got
really,
that
really
dream
like
home
it.
and
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
it is. I don't know. I sawed some butternut for him. He's got a big pole that goes up and then some.
We had our. Okay.
There were two big butternuts
No,
on
they
the
had to have another.
property and they blew over in a storm.
All right, I do have 10 a.m. We'll call the meeting to order and we'll rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was looking at my agenda and I was like, we're missing something, but it was the remote deal. So this is the first time in 2025 that we have the whole board together in one room. So this is kind of good. So it's nice to see everybody together here today. And we will move on to public forum here. I understand we have a couple. Should we do online first or do you want to go first, Denise?
Oh, your call.
Okay, let's do online first and then, yeah, I won't forget about in person here. So looks like we got Mark first here.
I think he wants to speak.
Yeah, Mr. Lambert is, I believe, for the public hearing for the.
Oh, okay.
ordinance amendments.
Okay, sounds good. Ryan, you had maybe somebody online?
There, Mr. Chair, there is a John and Becky Hen.
Yes, we are here.
Okay.
Talk to him. Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah, you guys, if you can announce your name and then where you live, and then you got 3 minutes, so.
Okay, my name is Becky Hen and I live 3 miles east of Carrick in Nickerson Township. And we were just informed this morning at 7:47 by Jeffrey Waldell that the property next to us was being donated to DNR for hunters and snowmobiles and such. And we had no idea. We were totally blindsided by this. And so we want to know what's going on. Why weren't we informed?
Typically, the public forum is you guys just talk to us and we don't usually talk back. If you do have any questions about it, we can reach out. You can reach out like after the meeting or whatever too, so.
we have tons of questions. We didn't know any of this was happening. We already struggle with him shooting guns off at all hour of night. Now it's going to be open to a bunch of people. And he tried to coerce us into selling him a quarter of our property, and we contacted a lawyer because of it. So it just feels very sneaky.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Dave Menke, County Administrator. I don't know if this is helpful or not, but there's a letter in the packet with contact information for the Department of Natural Resources and the Trust for Public Land Project Manager. The letter in the packet is simply meeting the statutory notification requirement. The board does not have an approval or disapproval role in this transaction. It's a notice requirement. If you wanted to discuss it as, part of this agenda or another agenda, certainly you can discuss those issues. But the actual deciders are the DNR, the landowner, and the Trust for Public Land. If the Mr. and Mrs. Hen want to follow up with them, that contact information is in the packet.
Okay, I know nothing of this packet or who to contact or anything. I was just given this Zoom number by, I believe, a Ryan Findell. And so when I say we're blindsided, we're totally blindsided. We have no idea what's going on.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, and I do believe we can communicate. I think Matt knows how to get a hold of you. And maybe he can communicate with you after.
And Mr. Chair, I can do that too. I can make
Okay.
sure that they get the information.
Thank you.
All right, anything else?
No, that was
Okay.
just that.
Okay, nope, thanks for reaching out and we appreciate it. And probably a couple people will be getting a hold of you and hopefully get you some answers.
Thank you.
Yep. Was there anybody else online? Okay, all right, in person, Denise, come on up.
I'll go off to the side here because I don't know who's, I'm just gonna say it just that way. I don't want to break in. You will be responsible for that. All right, Denise Weiss, Royalton Township. Been here several times. You guys know what the speech is going to be about. Zoning for cannabis. And that we have allowed this to be right next to people's homes, 250 feet away, by ignoring the Minnesota state suggested rules of industrial and commercial zoned areas. And so I just wanted to touch base. This is a big issue. They're going to be issuing licenses and we're not going to be able to go over this once it starts. Pine County Comprehensive Plan from 2017 to 2030 says on page 1, to reduce crime and the prevalence of drugs in order to maintain a safe community. This is what we have stated that we are going to do for our community. Sounds good. How many people are aware of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension? BCA. We all see it, we all hear it. But do you know that on the porthole, their Minnesota Drug and Crime and Overdose Dashboard, you can break it down per county. If you look at Pine County, which I just pulled this as of last night on 3/17, Pine County, if you look at the shaded colors, we get about a D. D in my household, and I had the 5 kids and 2 foreign exchange students, is a failing grade. And you can go by the color. Pine County has population of 29,814, offenses of 435, crimes 1,459. So then it goes on to the next page. There's lots of different matrix on this. Amphetamines, 248. Marijuana, 80. So marijuana is second. They don't call it cannabis, they call it marijuana. It's a drug. Most of that is for possession and concealing. Now we have opened up those even restrictions so that it takes more for somebody to be charged with this thing. If you look at the rate in 2025, 2024, 2023, 2022, 2021, they have a matrix. 2025 is increasing. We've already surpassed 2024 and we have surpassed 2022. And we are climbing. These are matrix. Easy to find right on the website. You look at Minnesota, 21,268 is amphetamines. The next one is marijuana at 15,000. These are the arrests so far this year, since the beginning of the year. The next one down from 15,000, that is antidepressants. I have a couple of names, and it's down to 4,398. Marijuana is the second highest problem in Minnesota and in our county. And we rate about a D per average. If you look at what the colors are. We say that we're a community that we want to protect people, yet we have not even put them in commercially industrial zone areas to protect communities and school buses and residents. This is deplorable. This is what our job is for, is to protect us. Now, I can complain, you can say I'm emotional, you can say whatever word you want to. The matrix, spell it out. These are the facts, these are the statistics. This is what we need to protect ourselves from. I'm asking you to please go back, at least put this product in industrial commercial zone areas to protect residents. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I will leave this for you guys. I'll probably email each of you to it, but at least you'll have it.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks.
You want to touch over, but you seemed like you were finishing up, so I let you go. Thanks. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak? I don't see anybody. And you had nobody new online, right? Okay. All right, we'll move to the agenda. Is there any additions or corrections?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just a minor addition on the regular agenda number 2C. As part of the Land Committee report, they are recommending calling a rail authority meeting for April 15th. And we thought that the 15th was the soonest we would have the information ready. We actually could have it ready to go April 1st. And that would be with the easement as one of the action items. And so if the board wanted to do it April 1st, we could do that, or we could do it on the 15th. So just when you get to that point, you can make that decision. And then there's two additional informations. There's a PowerPoint handout for regular agenda number 1, the ordinance changes, and then regular agenda number 5, the Soil and Water Conservation District update.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the agenda
Okay,
as changed.
I'll move it.
all right, so Holla moved it. You
Okay. I didn't hear Helen, sorry.
Ludwig second. Is there any other discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same thing. Okay, approve the minutes of the March 4th, 2025 regular county board meeting and summary for publication.
I'll move it.
All right, motion by Nelson,
I can second it.
second by Holland. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same thing. Okay, so minutes, boards, committees, and correspondence. Looks like we got Department of Health and Human Services, Pine County Historical Society correspondence, Pine County Surveyor's Monthly Report, Pine County Housing and Redevelopment Economic Development Authority meeting, and Department of Natural Resources correspondence.
That last part's in reference to that sale of that land, that 10.
Yep.
Okay. I will move that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Motion by Ludwig. Got a second?
I'll second it.
Second
by Holland. Is there any discussion
Mr. Chair,
or, yeah,
if I could just add, based on the earlier conversation during public forum, the county board here is acknowledging receipt of these correspondence, It's not approving or supporting anything in, it's just acknowledging that the people who wrote to you have been received by you.
okay. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, then the DNR knows what the board's been notified.
Yep. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, we have consent agenda. Someone want to make a motion for the consent?
Okay.
Okay. Ludwig. Anybody want to second it?
I'll second that one.
Second by Nelson. And, yeah, we don't have discussion on consent. All right. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same thing. Now, regular agenda, the moment Kelly's been waiting for.
Okay, if I do this. Okay, sounds good. So Kelly Schroeder, County Auditor Treasurer. And so today before you, I have a presentation on some ordinance changes that the zoning board recommended. And it's a kind of a big slew of them, so we're gonna talk through them and kind of explain them too, because some of them maybe don't written down, it's hard to understand how they would be applied in real life. So I have some examples to show how they get applied. So there are 3 ordinances we're proposing to make changes to, and I just wanted to review them. The zoning board reviewed all of these changes and recommended them to the county board on January 23rd. So the first changes to the county zoning ordinance, and just a reminder that only applies to cities and townships that have opted into that. So there are 7 cities and townships that applies to, and I have them listed there. The subsurface sewage treatment systems ordinance, it applies to any city or township that does not have a pollution control approved ordinance. So that one's kind of a wider breadth of townships and cities that it covers. And then the shoreline management ordinance applies to any township that does not have a DNR approved shoreline ordinance. And so we do have a handful of townships that do have shoreline approved or DNR approved ordinances. So then this applies to the other townships. So just kind of an overview of the 3 ordinances we're going to be talking about today and the changes to them and who it will affect. So the first change, we're going to talk about the county zoning ordinance first and the changes that are being proposed to that. So the first change is to short-term rentals. So previously in the county zoning ordinance, we referred to them as vacation rental homes. However, in like our shoreland ordinance and things, we always referred to them as short-term rentals. So it just is helpful to have the verbiage the same between the 2 ordinances. So we're removing that definition of vacation rental, but adding the definition of short-term rental, which are nearly the same. The definition we're proposing to add to short-term rental into the county zoning ordinance, it is exactly the one that's in the shoreland ordinance, so that they are one and the same, and there's no question. Properties are treated the same no matter which ordinance they are regulated under. The next change is to the use table. So we have this table that says in the different zoning districts, these uses are permitted, interim, conditional, they're not permitted. And so to that table, for short-term rentals, previously they were listed as an interim use permit required. And our zoning board operated both in the shoreland and in the county zoning areas with short-term rentals being an interim use for 3 or 4 years. They did a significant amount of permits as interim rentals or interim permits for those properties. And it really came down to every single public hearing was the same. The concerns were the same. The board was putting the exact same requirements on every single one. So it seemed like it was just, it wasn't really necessary to continue going through that interim use process. So in June, actually, the shoreland ordinance was changed to short-term rentals just being a permitted use. However, interestingly, that meant the county zoning ordinance, so the non-shoreland areas were more strict. They required an interim use permit, where in the shoreland areas, it was only an administrative permit. So this simply just makes the county zoning, the non-shoreland areas be treated just like the shoreland areas.
Mr.
Yeah.
So can we ask questions as you go?
Please.
So to me, so that's just so we could streamline the process, but the standards of the rental, the rules are gonna be what they, quiet time and all that stuff.
Right.
They're gonna be made aware of that at the time, right?
Right. All of the requirements now between the shoreland ordinance and the county zoning ordinance are exactly the same. And so it covers all sorts of things from quiet hours to pets to boats to number of occupancy that these properties can have.
Yeah, I remember it being standardized by the group, the board.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Chair? So if you want to do a short-term rental, you still get a permit. It's an administrative permit. You have to follow those requirements.
Correct. Yes. And so that's what section 4.11 is being added to the ordinance, is those permitting requirements. So that whole list of quiet hours and all of the requirements that they have to follow. So that is the short-term rental changes in the county zoning ordinance that were proposed. The last change in the county zoning ordinance revolves around density zoning. So some of you were on the board when we approved the county zoning ordinance, and we had this new concept that we put into the county zoning ordinance, which is density zoning. 2 parcels per 40 or 4 parcels per 40 in the agricultural areas. And the reasoning behind that is previously in a lot of areas, we had 20-acre minimums, 10-acre minimums. But when you run into agricultural areas, in order for people to make 10 acres, then they're cutting up fields. And now the farmer now has 3 landlords versus 1. And we want to encourage that agricultural use. So in requiring only a certain amount of parcels per 40, we could go smaller lot sizes, but really not increase the density at all. So when there were 20-acre minimums, a 40 you would have 2 parcels, and now the farmer has 2 landlords. Or if we went 2 per 40, we still have 2 parcels, but one's 2.5 acres and one's 37.5 acres. So just a reminder what density zoning is. We ran into a little issue this fall with how we had it laid out in the ordinance though. We had great explanations of if there was more than 1 owner in the 40, who had the splitting rights, who didn't, all of those things. But the issue that we ran into was, as the picture shows there, so kind of you can see the orange lines, it says the southeast, northeast, and the northeast, southeast. So those are each a quarter section. So each of those are a 40. And you'll notice there's this parcel that spans between 2 of them. And so that is where the problem came in this fall, is we had a parcel, somebody that bought a 40, but it had a little corner out of it that was owned by somebody in a different 40. And the question came of does that 40 already have 2 parcels? Does that 1 parcel get counted as a parcel in each 40? How does that work? And so there was a lot of discussion at the zoning board. And in the end, the decision was made that they wanted to look at it as each of the 40s would be considered having a parcel in it because there had been acreage split from that parcel. And so I requested that we just add that language in the ordinance so everyone is clear how we're going to treat those situations when there is a parcel that is in both 40-acre pieces. Questions on that?
Yeah. I think I got this straight, but if I bought a 80, and it already had 2 5-acre lots carved out of it. Now I've got 70 really, not 80. So those 2 lots, one of those 40s is not dividable in.
Depending on if you're in a 2 per 40 or a 3 per 40 area.
Yeah.
Right. And again, the whole idea was so that you're really not changing the density, you're just allowing smaller parcels so that we aren't breaking up those fields.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
So can you do a variance? Like, let's say there's a farm and the farmer's going old and a son or somebody takes over. And it's already has parcels out of that chunk. Can you do a variance so they can make a spot for that person to live and maybe a stay at, that type of thing? Can that still happen?
Right, so we did hear it, we heard that exact variance basically this fall.
Okay.
And that's where this whole conversation came from.
Yeah, because that's, we don't want to eliminate that ability for a family to take care of their parents or to help or whatever.
Yeah, cultural zones, we also do allow 2 houses
Yeah.
on a property in those farm, those agricultural instances where you have parents and kids living on the same property.
Okay.
So that they don't even necessarily have to split them unless they want it.
Thank you.
So Kelly, what happens then when the parents aren't there anymore and the kids don't want that piece of land and it's got two dwellings on the next landowner. Do they inherit those, by default, get those two things and they can rent one of them out?
Right, so if it's in the agricultural zone, it is just okay to have two houses on one property. So,
Whether or not mom and dad are living in it or I'm renting it.
right. So again, this just clarified, for example, the 240s we have on the screen, the north 40 would be considered already having two parcels. And that south 40 would be considered having three parcels.
I like it.
And where, do we, is there a map in our packet of, or in your presentation of where these zones are?
They're on Beacon, and so you can always go on there and click non-shoreline zoning and it will show you. It's just important to remember we only have zones in 7 cities and townships. So those townships are Newdozy, Pine Lake, and Carrick and Nickerson. Otherwise, you've got those small cities which typically don't have agricultural type places.
Or the rest of the townships have their own.
Right, the rest of their townships have their own zones, which this wouldn't apply to because it only applies to those townships that have opted in.
Have you considered the fact that making some of these changes may cause townships that may be considering coming as part of our ordinance to say we're not gonna be part of your ordinance because of some of these restrictions?
And we've actually heard the opposite. We've mostly heard from townships of, we want something more strict. Can't you make it more strict? And we're of the mind of at least we have something. It's kind of bare bones, but we have something to available to you.
Mr. Chair. So I think this change taken in concept is trying to be more supportive of preserving agricultural land in the rural areas. And so if you're more favoring residential development in the rural areas, this would not be the policy for you. But if you're trying to preserve that, the tillable land in single ownership, that's like the policy goal that this is expressing.
Yeah, and townships have a menu of, I think we have 7 different zoning classifications, and the townships literally tell us what they want them to be. So if they don't want this, that's fine. They'll just choose a different zone. All right, that was the end of the changes to the county zoning ordinance. The septic ordinance is a really easy one. In the holding tank section, when we drafted this back in 2013 and 2014, we required that if someone was going to operate on a holding tank, they had a water meter. And the thinking behind that, because I clearly remember these conversations, the thinking behind that was that way we would be able to show if someone's midnight pumping. So they're not properly getting their holding tank pump, they're pumping it out in the middle of the night into the ditch and those things. So we'd be able to take their water meter readings and say, well, your water meter says you used 5,000 gallons, but you've only had your 1,000-gallon tank pumped once. Where did that extra 4,000 gallons go? We've run into lots of problems with this though. First off, you'll notice the pictures I have on the screen. These are your typical properties that have holding tanks. So campers, hunting shacks that get used 1-2 months a year, those types of things. So it seems really silly to add several $100s to a system for properties that, like with a camper, it's very hard to put a water meter on it because they're fed with a hose. And I mean, some of them have these outdoor showers and they're watering the dog and there's all sorts of things that makes the water meter not useful. And with the hunting shacks, really, they're hardly using any water anyways. So in the end, it's not something that's required by the state in state rule in Minnesota 7080. It was one of those requirements that was really extra that we put on. And we've really found it's not a useful tool and it's just adding costs to septic systems. Questions on that?
No, it makes sense to me anyway. If you don't pump it in your toilets, you're just eliminating.
Right, and the rules does still allow us in certain circumstances, if we find the need, we could require it. But in general, we don't want to make every single holding tank have them because it just doesn't make sense. And sometimes they're in the house, and how are you gonna even get the reading off of it anyways? All right, our rate changes. Well, I don't know how it skipped so far ahead. All right, so our bigger changes is in the shoreline ordinance, so we'll spend some more time talking through these things. So in the shoreline ordinance, we had a few definition changes, which are, I think, pretty straightforward. We had heard some feedback from townships on our definition of home occupation. Previously, we only allowed as a home occupation it to be the inhabitants of the house. So if my child is running a welding business in my shop and he's living with me, great. But the second he moves to the house next door, it says that now he can't have his welding shop there. And I get it, that doesn't quite make sense. So we added language that allows it to not only be the occupants, but the immediate family members of those occupants running that business, that home occupation business. And then the other question that we got is, well, when it's not a home occupation and it's still a business, what is it? And so we added language that says, if it doesn't meet the criteria of a home occupation, then it's either considered a commercial or an industrial use, depending on the nature of the business. So that it clearly tells people where you go once you are no longer a home occupation. And then the last definition that we added was a definition of an office building, which is something that we'll talk about in a little bit because we are adding some other office building information in the ordinance. And so I always, whenever you read an ordinance, it's always helpful to know what are we actually talking about. So we just added a definition of an office building into the shoreline ordinance. After definition changes, we have interim use permits. So previously, the interim use permit purpose and intent of it was kind of strangely written. It was written it said that an interim use permit is to allow a temporary use of an unallowed, unpermitted use. And that's really not true. If you cannot do something, if something's a non-permitted use, you just can't do it. Interim uses allow you to do something that we find acceptable for a shorter period of time, whether that is when the property sells, whether that's in 3 years from now, whether that is, the zoning board determines what that length of time is. So this just updates using kind of more statutory language as to what the purpose intent of using interim use permits is. All right, and really the meat and potatoes of the changes is in the zoning district. Over the last couple years, you've heard lots of discussion from the zoning board, from property owners, from townships about our zoning districts. And the one zoning district that we previously did not have in our shoreline ordinance was this zoning district called water-oriented commercial residential. And when we don't have a zoning district in our ordinance, that makes it so townships can't have zoning that district in their ordinance. Townships need to be as or more restrictive as the county. And so when we don't have something, it makes it so townships can't have it. So while we don't have anything in the county purview that we want to zone in this district, Windermere Township does. So in order for Windermere Township to have the zoning district in their shoreline ordinance with no questions asked, it needs to be in our ordinance. That doesn't mean we need to zone anything as it, but at least it's in our ordinance. So we added that district, and then along with adding that district, we have to describe the purpose of that district. And really that purpose of that district is that mixed use type businesses. commercial businesses, residential type properties, commercial planned unit developments, residential planned unit developments, kind of a whole hodgepodge of all sorts of things that could potentially be mixed together. And so adding that district purpose really just gives you the backbone as to why you're adding that district and when you would apply that district. But again, we aren't planning to apply that district anywhere. So when we add a district, though, we also need to add a use table. So our use tables are split between lakes and rivers. So we have two different tables. And so this is a brand new use table because it's a brand new district. So on the left-hand side, it goes through different uses of the properties. And then depending on what type of lake or depending on what type of river tells you whether the use is P, permitted, or C, a conditional use. So it goes through all those different types of uses and the different lake types and says, you know, that use, what I can do with it, or can I just not even do it in those districts or in that district? So you'll notice as you look through this, it really comes down to it's allowing a lot of, it's that mixed use. It's allowing a lot of those uses, but mostly under conditional use permits. So meaning it has the oversight of the zoning board. And there's a public hearing and things that goes along with it. The next kind of use table change, so you've seen a use table. The next use table change that we are looking to make is in the high density residential district. That's district we've had in our ordinance already. And so we have a table like this in our ordinance that goes through for lakes and rivers, what permitted uses are, what conditional uses are. We got a request from Pokegama Township, though, to add office building as a conditional use. So in the county zoning, in what we have jurisdiction over for Shoreland, we actually, just like the water-oriented commercial residential, we have nothing zoned high-density residential. But Pokegama Township does. It's a picture of the beautiful building there. You may recognize it. It's the old sanatorium building, which has been vacant for many years and has been subject to vandalism and all sorts of things. They had a developer come forward and want to make it into office space. However, because the county did not allow office buildings in the high-density residential district, Pokegama Township wasn't allowed to add office buildings in the high-density residential district. So this is another one of those things that really it has no effect on us, but it has a big impact on the township and is very helpful to the township to hopefully finally be able to repurpose a building that has been an eyesore and a problem property for many years. The next change is in the agricultural feedlot section. I found it interesting because you may remember in June of 2024, we updated our ordinance. We did a significant overhaul to our shoreland ordinance. And the DNR went through it with a fine-tooth comb and approved it. However, then after that was approved, I started looking at it and realized our agricultural feedlot section was completely contrary to state statute. So our agricultural feedlot section said that, you know, if you're going to establish a new feedlot in the shoreland areas, here's the things you have to do. But state statute just says you cannot make a new feedlot in shoreland areas, the end. So it seemed very contrary as to why then our ordinance was giving you how you make a new feedlot in the shoreland area, because you just can't do it. So it updates the language to be consistent with Minnesota statutes, which does not allow new feedlots in the shoreland. It also references any of those existing feedlots over to the Minnesota rule that regulates them. It doesn't seem like we need to regurgitate in our ordinance something that we don't even regulate. We might as well just send it over to Department of Ag and their rules. And then the other piece that was found too, that there is a statute out there that allows old feedlots that are no longer in operation in shoreland areas to potentially resume operation consistent with some requirements in this statute. So it updates our agricultural feedlot section to be consistent with state statute, which was, it was rather contrary to state statute the way it was written. Section 5.6.7. So in June, we did that huge overhaul on our shoreline ordinance, which included a ton of changes for short-term rentals. One of the things that we heard from townships that they were concerned about was they liked it when we had it as an interim use permit because their township ordinances require it as an interim use permit. And the question came of, okay, so county, our non-shoreland ordinance says it has to be an interim use permit, but now your shoreland ordinance just says you're gonna give them a permit. And we would like our more strict requirements to apply. So there's just a handful of townships that do have township zoning ordinances, non-shoreland ordinances that have that requirement for short-term rentals to be an interim use. So we added language to our shoreland ordinance and the DNR approved this that requires if a township in their township ordinance requires an interim use permit, the people need to get that before they come to get our county just regular permit, because there's a public hearing and all sorts of things that the township does with that. So it just clearly directs that don't apply for our permit until you have your township permit if the township requires one. And then the other piece is hopefully to make things a little bit more smooth in that it doesn't make people go through two huge complete permitting processes, one for the township and one for the county. So it just adds language that if a township permit is required and it meets all of the county requirements that are listed in the ordinance, so that's quiet hours, that's boats, that's occupancy. If the township permit meets all of those same requirements, they just simply need to give us a copy of their township permit. And that is as far as we'll take an application, and there wouldn't be a fee or anything because the people have already gone through the more rigorous process with the township. And then section 5.7.2 is another one I found interesting that in the June update, really, we should have looked at this section because there was a significant amount of septic sewage treatment requirements in the shoreland ordinance. Some of them were outdated, some of them just referred to old ordinances. But I really struggle with having septic regulations in two different places that basically say the same thing. So we updated this section to really just refer over to the county's septic ordinance. Rather than repeating the same thing in two ordinances and potentially updating it in one and missing it in the other, it just simply refers over to the one county ordinance. Yeah, I don't know if there's questions on that. It really just will prevent issues in the future of having one ordinance say one thing and another ordinance say another thing. It just puts it all to the one.
We handle all of them in the shoreline anyway, don't we?
We do not, for example, Pekegama Township, we do not.
Oh,
Because they
okay.
have their own shoreline ordinance and they'd have their own septic.
Okay.
All right, and our last shoreline ordinance change, and so this is something, and the next slide actually has a picture of the situation. So a non-conforming structure is a structure that existed when we adopted the ordinance, but it doesn't currently meet the ordinance requirements. The most typical non-conforming thing we see is a setback issue, that the properties were built in the 50s, 60s when there wasn't shoreline requirements, and they were built very close to the water. So currently, if someone wants to really do anything with those non-conforming properties, whether it is adding a small addition even on the non-water side, all of those things, they need to get a variance from the zoning board, which is a public hearing. It's our 7 people listening to it, all sorts of things. However, really in the end, there's sometimes that a variance just is a process that is almost busy work because what they're asking to do makes sense. And the DNR has given us language, the DNR actually wrote this language for us, that allows people to entirely replace their non-conforming structures with a new structure as long as the new structure isn't any bigger than the old one. They're not, in the future, they're not able to make it bigger either. And that nonconformity is improved. So my next slide, I have the example where this came up. So you'll notice, kind of next to the river there, there's something called Old Dwelling.
Remember this.
So that old dwelling is 25 feet from the river. So the setback to the river today is 100 feet. And so these people wanted to replace their house. So they had options. They could replace their house exactly where it was in the exact same size and be able to do that just with getting a permit from us. Or they could move it back to the 100-foot mark, which is where that existing garage and shop was built. They can move it there and just get a permit from us. Or the way that the ordinance was currently written of if they wanted to move anywhere else, like their new proposed building, they needed to get a variance from us. And it would seem like if I have the option to build a new building 25 feet from the river or 50 feet from the river, we should really want them to put it at the 50-foot mark. That it doesn't make any sense to say, okay, we're not gonna give you a variance to put it at 50 feet. Please go put it back at 25 feet. That just doesn't make any sense. And so the DNR did approve us adding this language that allows this to happen, as long as that new building is not any larger than the old building. And this new building cannot ever be expanded, but we have significantly improved that nonconformity. Yes, we haven't completely made it conforming, but we have made a huge leap forward in conformity. And that's one of those things to me that's that's significantly lessening the restrictions that people have in these situations. And the DNR is okay with it, so I would think we'd want to grab it. Questions on that? All right, that is the end of all of my changes.
All right, so that'll bring us to the county board questions and discussion. Does anybody have anything here? Any discussion? Okay. So at this time, then we'll open it up for public hearing and take public testimony. Now, I do believe we have someone online. Go ahead and state your name and go ahead, Mark. Thanks.
Sure. Mark Lambert, Sand Lake Resort, Windermere Township. Just wanted to put a plug in for Kelly and all her hard work and for the Planning Commission on the endless and tireless challenge of meeting shoreland requirements today, not only for the county, but that little provision that says that one can't be more restrictive than the other. I do tend to think editorially that that provision needs some work because it seems to be interpreted that down to setbacks and the most minute things, if one is more difficult than the other, the DNR hooks onto that and somehow claims that you can't do something because the county may say it, but the township doesn't. And I can't ever believe that that was the intent of what the legislators meant when they adopted that. But be that as it may, editorial aside, I want to ask for your support on the water-oriented commercial residential use table and language that the Planning Commission has put in here. I think that will be helpful to our cause at Sand Lake and with our Sand Lake Resort. So I'd ask your support.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public testimony? I don't see nobody here. There's nothing else online. Okay, we'll close the public hearing and then open it up for additional discussion on the board. Any other discussion or questions here? And Kelly went over it pretty good.
She did a good job. She answered the question I had not before the, what I thought I'd have.
All right, well then, we'll close the county board additional discussion and go to consider the adoption of ordinance 2025-11.
I move we adopt that ordinance 2025-11, amending the county zoning ordinance
All right,
and the subsurface treatment systems ordinance and the shoreline management ordinance.
sounds good. All right, do we have a second?
I can second that.
All right, we have a second by Holland, motion by Ludwig, second by Holland. Okay, all right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same thing. All right. We will move on to Land Advisory Committee report. You want me to take it or you want to do it?
I don't care, either one. If you want to, you can, otherwise I'll take it.
You want to do this and I'll be personnel?
Yeah, I'll do this. Yeah, so we had our meeting on the fifth and, I'm sure you all saw our minutes in the packet, but, we recommend the county board contribute up to $25,000 to the dedicated Parks and Recreational Fund for Willow River's project to develop 23 acres that were bought out in the floodplain when the Kettle River flooded. They're gonna make a park in there and for the public and stuff. And then we went through the land auctions and we recommended at the committee, the county board approve resolute to classify certain parcels as non-conservation in order to sell those parcels. And recommend a resolution of the county board to withdraw previous land sale parcels from over the counter sale so they can be reappraised in July. So they can go on the sale in the fall. And then approve resolution 2025-13 for the tax forfeited land classification, non-conservation, and authorize the board and approve resolution number 2025-14 to withdraw those parcels. And then we had a discussion on the rail. There's a parcel of land. No, wait, this is different than that one. Call a special meeting for the County Regional Rail Authority for April 15th, which we'll hear, but on some easements to cross the rail bed up there, but it doesn't have to be strictly for April 15th. We can get it done on the on the April 1st. So that's the only thing we have to decide there, when you want to do that. Other than that, that's all the major things that we discussed as far as action. And I don't have the minutes in front of me on that, but.
Yeah, so I was just gonna add a couple of quick things. The Parks and Recreational Fund, yeah, the Willow River came to our meeting and they got, I guess they call it the Big Bend area. There's a lot of fishing and stuff that goes on. It's used, they own the property. They want to develop it into maybe a park, make it a little nicer, put some like a pavilion type of thing and some parking and so it looked like a good project and they were pretty excited. So.
And we have funds that are set aside just for those type of projects, and we've supported local projects in the past, like Sandstones Trail and things like that, so.
The one thing we did discuss in that is we're gonna try to have a policy, so it's like.
Right.
If it's above a certain amount, it's 50% or 25, I don't know.
We're
just
working on
kinda-
that in our
yeah.
next meeting, yeah.
So it's a little more, sometimes it'll be 50%, sometimes that's kind of how we've been doing it. So it's a little more, makes a little more sense and it's a little,
It's a real good project.
yeah, that looked like a really good project there. So, and,
Here, I have a question
yep.
about that before you go. So is that already approved? Are you asking for
Nope,
that?
that's
today, or-
that's what we're doing on here. So
And what about the policy? When is that gonna?
we're gonna work on that over the next couple of land meetings or the next one.
And the last question on that, what is the fund balance in this?
It was
This fund?
700 and something.
Right around 700 something.
Yeah, it was over 700,000. So, and these are, yeah, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, Mr. Chair, members of the board, that fund is going to be a diminishing return fund for the most part. It was funded from the tax forfeit land sales. And so with the new sale requirements, there is gonna be less money. There will be some timber proceeds that go into that fund, but it will not be as healthy going forward as it has been in the past.
That's why we thought the policy probably would be a good thing to put in place there. So,
And if we do, that'll come before the board, because we want to have a strict policy in place, just how much if we do a percentage from now on or whatever to manage that fund.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I would just like that, I visited that area, Big Bend, with representatives of the city and just some constituents, and it'll tie in nicely with the trail system and everything else. It'll just be a nice thing to add to that community.
Good to hear. Yeah, maybe, Dave had a good deal there, or a good suggestion. Maybe should we just do these A, B, and C?
Yeah.
We'll do A. So A is the Parks and Recreational Fund. If someone wants to make a motion for that.
I'd make that motion.
All right, motion by Waldham. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ludwig. Is there any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same thing. And now B under land auctions. And I think there's a couple resolutions here, 2025-13 and 2025-14. So the one is we have to withdraw the previous offered to redo it. So if that makes sense, if someone wants to make a motion on that.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. And that's for resolution 2025-13 and
Both resolution.
-14. There's a second.
I'll second it.
Second by Holland. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same thing. All right, now C, which is,
How about the meeting date? How do you want to pick that?
yeah, that's, I think what we're doing here is just pick a meeting date to convene the rail authority. So I don't see any reason if they can get it done by the first, why we wouldn't do it the first, but
We can just let the staff decide, as far as I'm concerned, what works best for the meeting.
we have to make a motion.
Well, we have to post the date, time, location, and purpose of a special meeting. And so it's easiest if you decide you want it on the first, we'll just have it on the first. For those two reasons, the easement by MinDOT.
And this isn't approving this. This is just
No, it's just-
a date,
Right.
go over it, everything like that.
And we'll just work the meeting like we do on the annual meeting as part of the regular county board meeting.
Yep. But them are the two things we're gonna talk about, is the easement and the crossing. So,
For me, I'd rather do it on the first because I got some doctor issues that might conflict with the 16th.
okay, yeah, I think the first is Brett, we might as well get it done.
I hear it.
How about the first? I think,
First is fine with me, yeah.
Okay.
Either one's
can
fine.
we get a motion in a second?
Um,
Okay, Holland moved it. Someone want a second?
Second.
All right. And any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, same thing. All right, we're good? Okay. Personnel Committee, we did meet March tenth and made the following recommendations. In Health and Human Services, approve the upgrade to a grade 7 community support technician job description to include the language regarding work with families involved with child protection. The proposed revisions have been reviewed through the Springstead Class and Compensation Safe System with no changes to the position, grade, or pay. In Public Works, approved the Assistant County Engineer position regrade from grade 16 to grade 17 following the position review through the Springstead Class and Compensation Safe System. In the Sheriff's Office Jail, approved the backfill of part-time corrections officer Henry Randa. And in the Auditor, Treasurer, and Zoning, ratify the separation of environmental technician Lucas Olson effective January 11, 2025, and approve the backfill of the position, any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. With that, I will make the motion to approve them.
I'll second, Mr. Chair.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I guess, I'm sure that these are positions that are, been through, and it's, every department says they're necessary, and I'm not disputing that. However, as we go down the road, just want us to be aware, you know, we talked about what's our budget gonna look like in a year. And I tell you what, it's really painful to have to do cuts. Especially for the personnel, there's a lot of consternation there. And if indeed we are facing that in the future, we don't know. Legislature's not done. We'll see what happens. But I'm just saying, let's be cognizant of that. And it's easier to maybe forgo a hire at the moment than try to figure out how we're going to cut somebody, you know, in 6 months. So not necessarily am I saying no at this point, but we just can't continue down this road.
Mr. Chair. Oh, you done?
If I just fin- yep.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you know, some of these are backfills.
Yep.
You know, maybe not necessarily new hires, but as I look at the sheet, we have no separations and 5 new hires. So we are expanding our budget, even though some of these positions have been open for a while. So that's just maybe my overall.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I appreciate those comments. And what we've done historically, when we kind of know we're looking at bad, if we can, we will delay a backfill. We've done it sometimes for 8, 9 months to see how the budget's going along, and then we'll fill it later in the year, even with just a little bit of the year left, if it works out. So do we miss sometimes or whatever? Yeah, we could, but I think it's a good for us to always be aware of that. What you're saying. You can hold off on a backfill at times too and save money, and we've done that a number of times.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I would, echo Roger, that I appreciate your comments, that it does weigh on all of our minds, that we don't know what the future is going to be like. And so maybe if it's worth it, I could take a minute to just give a little more explanation of some of what we're doing. And so on letter A, that's adding more duties and expectations to an existing grade 7 position. That does not change the grade of that position. It just allows that position to do more of the tasks that we see as part of the Minnesota African American Family Preservation and Disparities Act. And so right now, if we don't make these changes, those tasks have to be done by a social worker, which is a grade 10, versus this position, which is a grade 7. And so it really is just moving some duties around that we think is going to set us up better in the future to account for that new law that goes into effect January 1st, 2026. On the public works, that regrades the existing position. It is currently filled, doesn't immediately change any pay. It does move the top of the scale, and we have a pay for performance system for non-union employees. And so that incumbent would be eligible for future increases if the top of the scale raises, but there's not an immediate raise that tracks the action that you would take today if you approve it. And then obviously the sheriff's office, that's a backfill, that's a vacant position right now. And the environmental technician is a vacant position. And that position has been vacant for quite a while, working through some issues with that staffing position. We have had some contractor work involved in doing some of the septic inspections. Filling this position would allow us to drop that contract. And so I hope, Roger, that we're trying to incorporate what I think is your desire that we be put a little brighter eye on it. And maybe if the personnel committee is willing, and I know Jackie's the HR manager in the back, we would maybe forward more of that information in the future, just to give some satisfaction that we are doing that and meeting your expectations.
I would just like to add the sheriff's office and the jail, that position. The reason that one's vacant is because he went to the trainee position in the sheriff's department. So in the deputy trainee that we passed here a month or two ago. So actually that is that is saving us a little bit of money. Now, that was a corrections officer that went to the other side, but that's what, because me and Matt we had this discussion and we just weren't reading it right because we thought maybe it was a new position and it wasn't. But, so, yeah. Is there any other discussion on the personnel committee?
Maybe my last question would
Yeah.
be, so we approved in the consent agenda 2 hires. But then we have additional hires here. So I was just wondering why we separated that or why.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, in the consent agenda is the action to hire a particular person for a particular job at a particular pay. And so on the Personnel Committee, you'll authorize, for example, the backfill of a part-time corrections officer. When we get a person for that position, it will show up on the consent agenda.
So that those positions were already approved.
Yeah.
Correct.
They sure are.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, not a
Good
problem.
question.
Yeah, good question. Okay. Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed, same thing. Perfect. All right, senior linkage line, Central Minnesota Council on Aging. We have Lori Borelson. Did I say that right? Okay. So, all right, and you can come up and introduce yourself and.
Well, as I stand here, I'm glad I don't have to have the knowledge of land ordinances and surveys. My name's Levon Sorensen, and I am with the Senior Linkage Line, Central Minnesota Council on Aging. Lori Volson is the Executive Director of Central Minnesota Council on Aging. And we've come today, we just want to share a little bit of information with you about Senior Linkage Line, just kind of what we do, who we are, and things like that. And if you'll just give me a moment, I'll put my password.
as you're getting set up, I've been the chairman of this fine organization for a number of years. They're located in the St. Cloud area and have rented space from, this is the 3rd different space you've been in since I've been on that board. But I've told Lori this, I think the first time I was ever at a meeting, that was the most, like I felt like a fish out of water ever, because the acronyms, everything was just foreign to me. I've been on that board for about 18 years now, and I finally think I know that I can explain to somebody what they really do. But and I've always told people, we don't know what these programs do until we really have to live them. And when my in-laws were going through their transition of life, so to speak, that senior linkage line and having the comfort of having a social worker who was contracted through the Central Minnesota Council on Aging, through the Family Pathways at the time, to come and sit down with Becky and I and talk about all these options after listening to all the options on senior linkage line is a valuable tool. So I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but it's something that you see those billboards or something, it does not connect until either you yourself have to use some of that, or you're doing it for your parents or your in-laws or a friend.
Thank you so much, and that's so true. It reminds me of the calls that we get all the time of, I'm turning 65, do I need to do anything? So yeah, we just want to, and thank you so much for talking about that piece, because it's a complicated process, everything from Medicare to long-term care services. And I just want to go through a few things here, and you've got great technology here, so I'm going to try and not mess this up. I just wanted to speak a little bit about, in general, Senior Linkage Line. We actually are on the phones and we accommodate all 87 counties in Minnesota. I always like to talk about the old days of when you called in, you would get to the representative in your area, and cell phones came along, and that just ruined everything. And so actually you'll get anybody that's next in line on the senior linkage line, but we have the resources to help everybody in the entire state, even though these are our contact centers. And you can see them there. I won't go through them. I'm kind of a talker, so I want to be conscious of my time and let Lori have a chance to speak. But we're from Central Minnesota Council on Aging. Our office is in St. Cloud, and you can see that there. Our job through senior linkage is to not give advice, but to educate people. So we are a free service provided to any Minnesotan, and we're funded through state and federal dollars that Lori's going to talk about a little bit more about. We remain neutral. We won't recommend any provider over another. We won't recommend any plan over another, any company over another. Our job really, again, is not to advise, but to give free educational information for you to make an informed decision. And again, we're objective. We'll share the information we have so you can make that informed decision or choice for yourself. These are some of the areas that we cover, and maybe not. I'm not sure. There they are. Okay. So transportation, these are just some of the things that we get calls about. There's a million others. So it's anything from providing transportation. We get a lot of calls on that, especially from rural areas like Pine County. Also, somebody, maybe just an elderly person, needs some help in the home. They want to remain there. So maybe they need some house cleaning services or some, maybe they need some help setting up their medications or filling their medications or affording their medications. So these are all, and probably a lot of the pieces that we do are support programs. So it's anything from helping people fill out applications to some of these programs, to helping them heat their house and helping them know about the services that are out there, like energy assistance, and some other things that they may qualify for. And last but not least, we have our return to community people, our resource coordinators that help people to move from hospital, nursing home, assisted living. So that is a whole nother piece of senior linkage line. I think you referred to that, and just having the people with the knowledge to help people if they want to move back home. What does that look like? Is it safe to do that? And what services are available in my area? And those coordinators are available through Senior Linkage Line free of charge. So we could probably talk a little bit or probably a lot about all of these things, but I want to, again, be conscious of our time. And last but not least, this is probably my forte. So all the information that is given about land and things, I could talk all day about Medicare, and that's a lot of our program is talking to people about Medicare, asking questions, how do I enroll, things like that. So Medicare is a very complicated process, as we all know. Maybe some know better than others, and we've been through that process. But that's like the calls that we get about, I'm turning 65, do I need to do anything tomorrow? So that we do a lot of Medicare counseling, health insurance counseling. Some other things that we do is the housing support, and I am not sure. I'll just talk a little bit about this is, again, we get a lot of calls about housing, whether it's someplace to live, whether it's someone just seeking for services in their home to help them remain living there. I'm guessing that a lot of people are familiar about the MnChoice assessment done through the county or the state. And sometimes it's just referring people to those resource coordinators through Senior Linkage Line that can help them navigate through that process. Speaking of that housing support, I just want to talk shortly about, I had a Pine County, the representative out here and the resource coordinator is Mary. And Mary had a couple she was working with, and the lady had lymphedema
The husband really never cooked any meals. And they were really struggling with mealtime and for food preparation. And she was able to meet with them and help set up services for home delivered meals. And they called her back and said it was a life-changing event. And some things that we just take for granted that is such a life-changing event for other people, for elderly, or maybe people that are struggling. Sometimes I think that just the little things make such a huge difference in their life. And I apologize because I think I have, yes, the wrong, well, no, I'm sorry. We had confused everybody about 2 different presentations, and I don't know if you're able to access the other one, but that's okay. We can just talk in general about Senior Linkage Line and what we do. One of our biggest things is we had a lot of people call, and sometimes our phone lines are very busy. And I'll give you some of those statistics, but we had a lot of people call. We now, you can chat with Senior Linkage online. You can call us. We meet with you in person. So I'm the representative for Pine County. I meet people face to face if they have questions about Medicare, if they need assistance filling out forms. So that's one way to meet. And the other way is also you can actually go online to Senior Linkage and make a referral to us. We don't do any cold calling per se, but anyone is able to make a referral on Senior Linkage Line. So that's just, there's several different ways to reach us. And I just want you to know about those ways. And I apologize for not having the right, we had sent, this actual presentation is more geared to the people that do a lot of the pre-admission screening. So I'm just gonna kind of go through those and kind of get to the place where we need to be. And so we went with all the ways that you can reach Senior Linkage Line. I don't know if this one has the Minnesota Help. What we tell people is this service, Senior Linkage, is a free service for anyone in Minnesota. And I always tell people for anybody, and they said, well, can seniors, are they the only ones that can call Senior Linkage Line? And no, it's seniors and anybody that knows one. So that pretty much kind of encompasses everybody. We get a lot of calls from children, from about their parents and things like that. So really, it's a free service. It's not just for seniors. And we really do try to help every caller that comes in on the line. There is a resource that we use called Minnesota Help. I don't think it's here, but I just want to tell a little bit about Minnesota Help. Has a lot of resources online. It is a tool that we're able to use as a Senior Linkage representative, but it's there for anybody. So if I want to look up transportation in Pine County or in my area, then that is a great tool to use for any resource someone's looking for. I had somebody the other day that was looking for employment and just what application do I fill out for long-term care services? So we have many other materials in print that we send out on a daily basis. Here's some of them. The Planning Ahead Guide. We use the Medicare 101 guide. I don't know if anybody's aware of when you enroll in Medicare, you get this thick book about 80, 90 pages. And they're like, I just need to know the substance. And so the Medicare 101 booklet just talks about the substance of that. And then the Helping Older Americans, we have an actual kiosk card that we give out too if someone's struggling and want to remain home and maybe would benefit from a return to community provider or a return to community visit. And then I just want to give a little bit of a plug about the other people that we use, the other resources that we use, the Disability Hub that's out there for people under 65 and not on Medicare. But really, like I said, we all these lines, the Senior Linkage, the Veterans Linkage line, we're not going to turn anybody away. And if anything, we do a lot of warm transfers amongst each other. Maybe we have a veteran that's looking for home services, and that may be a piece that he may be able to access through the VA, or directing them to their veteran service officer. So really, when you call senior linkage line, we don't just send you out there and say, call here. Usually we'll do a warm transfer with you. I'm gonna let Lori talk a little bit, and then at the end of yours, I think I do have some statistics.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Levon. So senior linkage is our only direct service that we do as an agency. And then our other key function is that we allocate out at the local level federal Older Americans Act funding. So last year, we awarded out to about 24 providers, $4.6 million. That is primarily federal funding. There is some state nutrition dollars in there as well. And so in 2024, about 24,000 older adults and family caregivers throughout our 14-county area were provided with services that really focus on helping them remain in their own homes. So things such as transportation, chore, homemaker, meals are the types of services. And these are all focusing on lower income older adults that are needing some supportive services. And so I think of our Older Americans Act as being kind of that safety net service. So these most often aren't individuals that are on Medicaid yet. So we're trying to keep them off of public assistance services. And these services are provided to individuals on a donation basis. So eligibility is 60 plus, and then there's no means testing from there. So in particular for Pine County specifically, this is based off of 2024 actual services provided. So out of our $4.6 million last year, $284,720 were provided specifically to individuals in Pine County. So Pine County represents about 4.7% of our 60 plus population in our 14-county area, and utilized from Pine County residents last year was 6.3% of the Older Americans Act funding. And you can see here with senior linkage, well, that's not Older Americans Act funded. I did put that number in here. Just over 1,665 long-term care options counseling sessions were provided to individuals from Pine County to 689 individuals. Homemaker, we have a contract with Family Pathways to do homemaker, which is things such as grocery shopping assistance, laundry, light housekeeping. They provided 39 individuals from Pine County with just over 1,485 hours of homemaking assistance this past year. The health assessment, that is a contract that we actually have with Kanabec County. So there were 9 individuals from Pine County that drove to Mora for 59 hours of health assessment that Kanabec County Public Health provided. So that's a little bit unusual. For the homemade or congregate dining and home delivered meals, 274 individuals from Pine County were provided with just over 30,000 meals last year. And caregiver services, those are provided by Family Pathways once again. And there were 74 caregivers that received a variety of caregiver support services. What you don't see it in this chart that, you know, Steve will see in when we look at our other counties is that we typically also have in here assisted transportation and chore services. And we currently do not have a provider under contract that's providing those services in these 5 counties out here. So that's something that we are working on, which is one of the reasons why we have a little bit more in Pine County, more meal sites than we do in some of the other counties. And then Midman Senior Law Project provided 23 individuals with Pine County with 71 hours of legal consultation this last year. I just wanted to touch a little bit more about the meals because I know that's a question that's been asked. So with with the sunsetting of the American Rescue Act dollars that ended last September, and with the new interstate funding formula that went into place in January, those two combinations, we are seeing that our funding allocation has gone down. So, in 2025, this number here for you of the $284,000 invested in Pine County, you'll see a decrease in that. Overall, our funding went from 4.6 million to just over 3 million, so about $3.5 million. And like I said, it's a combination of the sunsetting of the American Rescue Act dollars and the new interstate funding formula. So for example, with Family Pathways for the homemaking services in 2024, we funded them with $220,000. In 2025, that's about $156,000. So they will go from providing overall in the 5 counties out here just over 4,000 units of homemaking to being under contract with 2,025 units of homemaking. So about a 45% reduction. Similarly, in congregate dining and home delivered meals, so our funding comes down in pots. So we have an in-home support services, a congregate allocation, a home delivered meal allocation, and a caregiver allocation. And we have very limited ability to transfer dollars. So with our congregate dining and home delivered meals in 2025, we know in our 14 county area that we're going to be serving 80,000 less meals in 2025 than what we were able to do in 2024. So it's quite substantial. So we've been working with our 3 nutrition providers to really look at how we do some planned closures. Last year, we had 62 meal sites across our 14 county area, and we had to close 16 of them across the region. So for Pine County itself, our traditional home delivered meals for people that have, for example, been in the hospital, returned home, need some meals to help them because they're unable to prepare their own meals. Our traditional home delivered meals, we are trying not to make any changes in. So we're hoping that people that are in need of those traditional home delivered meals, we're seeing that as priority. We have also under home delivered meals, we have frozen meal distribution sites. In Pine County, we had 4 of them. And that's where we've done some closures in. So the frozen meal distribution sites, we started those during COVID, and we started to hear from food shelves that they were seeing about a 40% increase in older adults going to the food shelves. So we partnered with Catholic Charities to once a month partner with food shelves and nutrition assistance sites on NAPS to do, which are food commodity sites, to provide once a month frozen meal distributions where individuals can take packs of 10 or 20 meals home with them, in addition to their food commodities. And we had sites in Ascove at the community center and in Sandstone at Family Pathways. Those 2 sites have closed in 2025. But we are continuing the site at Willow River and Hinckley for the once a month frozen meal distribution sites. And then the congregate sites in Hinckley and Pine City do continue. We have not closed any congregate sites in Pine County. So, we are working on trying to secure some additional state funding for meals. Fortunately, we have not seen any reductions in our federal funding, our traditional Older Americans Act funding, but we have the loss of the American Rescue Act that sunsetted. So we have a bill proposal right now in both the Senate and the House for one-time funding of $11 million for the biennium to support senior meals. Historically, the state of Minnesota has provided $2.7 million for senior nutrition. Last biennium, we had that raised to $11 million for the biennium, and we're asking them for another one-time funding for the biennium of $11 million. That would directly go in line with these, with our congregate home delivered meals. And in addition, we're asking for 4 million of state funding to support assisted transportation, shore and homemaker services throughout the state. So in your packets, you do have a flyer about the call to action for the bill proposal at the state right now, and encourage your legislators to support that. Myself, along with Catholic Charities, was down at the Capitol last week and met with 9 representatives from our region. We targeted those that serve on the Health and Human Services Committee, and spoke about the need for the meals and it was well supported. So we're feeling pretty positive about our proposal at the state capitol right now. And then the other bill that we're working on at the federal level is transportation, is a transportation bill. Staber has reintroduced it. It's a Volunteer Drivers Appreciation Act. We see each year from our volunteer driver programs, they lose volunteers, especially during tax time, because volunteer drivers, well, in our contracts to our providers, they can reimburse that volunteer up to the business rate. So right now that's 70 cents. However, that volunteer federally has to claim income on anything over 14 cents. So we've worked with Staber's office before on this, and we're waiting for the tax cycle to start. And so it has been reintroduced, and we have expanded participation nationally on that. AMC has been a supporter of that, and I know that Matt's been working with NACO to have that be part of the legislative platform for the counties as well. So we're hoping this year that we can make that change and not have that unnecessary barrier for our volunteer drivers, because they are very important to our transportation network as a whole. So with that, are there any questions that you have?
Thanks, Lori, and thanks
Yeah.
for, looking out for our seniors in Pine County. We
And
appreciate
if
it.
I could just add one thing, we were able to go to the, sorry. We were able to extract some information of 2024, and CMCOA, so just our region on senior linkage, helped 12,319 people, and 690 of those people lived in Pine County. We had over 18,000 sessions or cases were conducted through the region. Over 1,000 of those were from Pine County. Probably one of the biggest things is we're able to save seniors dollars on prescription drugs. Really just depends on how the calculation of the drug plan that they're on and the pharmacy that they go to. But senior linkage was able to save 2.3 million to people on prescription drugs alone, and 788,000 in our region alone. So it's senior linkage involves in so many different areas, but those were just some of the statistics that were amazing to me as far as the dollars that we're able to save some of our seniors. Thank you.
And thank you to Pine County for your ongoing support for the services, and for Commissioner Helen serving on our board, and then Patrick serves on our advisory. And so our advisory is really the committee that's reviewing all the applications that come in, and collectively with the board set the priorities for what we can fund under Older Americans Act. What are the key target services that we're going to do? So I've always appreciated the support from Pine County. So thank you.
Well, thank you again.
One more plug for
Yeah.
senior linkage line. If somebody asks you about help for their parents or an elderly person asks, point them towards senior linkage. That's the,
I left some cards back there
Okay.
for myself, and if they can contact me or just the 1-800 magnet that.
yeah,
Thank you.
you're wonderful. I've been on the end of the phone with people, and they're wonderful.
I know I've given out the magnets to quite a few people, and I know I always hear good things. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to Pine County Soil and Water Conservation District.
All right.
Paul, I see you were here.
Hello, everybody, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Paul Swanson. I'm the district manager at Pine SWCD. I think I'm familiar with most of you. Commissioner Nelson, I've not had the honor to meet you yet, so hello, welcome, and congratulations on your recent win and being on the board. I just wanted to provide a quick update today to the county on what we some of the highlights and accomplishments of what we did in 2024 and some of the things we're already working on in 2025. I won't try to drag on too long, but I just wanted to give you guys an update and allow for an opportunity for any questions you might have. So we'll just do a review of 2024, some of the highlights that we did, and then again, like I said, looking into 2025 and some things we're looking at further down the road. First thing I wanted to talk about was project accomplishments in 2024. We were able to implement 21 conservation projects throughout the county, which is one of our largest, the most since I've been here, and probably one of the largest in the history of the district. A lot of that has to do with the influx of money coming through the watershed comprehensive management plans and the money that's coming from the Clean Water Fund from the state. Through that avenue, we've been able to be successful in leveraging some of those dollars. Of those 21 projects, 8 of them were shoreline projects on our lakes in the county. One was a stream bank channel stabilization project, which is highlighted in the picture below. 2 wetland restorations, 4 ag BMP practices. Again, the picture up there is cover crops within corn. The producer showing off the size of the turnips that were being grown in his cover crops. We did a structural ag project. We were able to help with water and sediment control basin, 3 forestry projects, and 2 well sealings. Overall, that was $172,102 worth of cost share coming out of our office. Again, that comes from state cost share funds, some of our local district funds, and a large portion of that comes from the watershed-based implementation that's coming from the comprehensive watershed management plans. That doesn't account for the funds we may have leveraged from our federal partners, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS. A fun little fact that we just discovered, a study was just released that in the state of Minnesota, for every $1 soil and water districts, the National Resource Conservation Service, or Bowser, spends on conservation, $1.81 is generated. So it's about $309,000 that's being put into our local communities. I did hand out that accomplishments in 2024. I'm not going to go through all the forestry, agriculture, water resource stuff, but if you have questions at the end, I'm happy to answer those for you. Outreach and education in 2024. Our board of supervisors has really leaned on this. This is actually some of our biggest efforts for 2025 is to continue to expand our education and outreach efforts. But we created several different opportunities to provide information and educational experiences for landowners on a wide variety of things. A few examples is the World Migratory Bird Day, which we're hosting again in May at Osprey Wilds. Conservation Conversations is something our ag technician has been doing with the University of Minnesota Extension over a variety of different agricultural topics. Cookout on the Farm is something we've done 3 years now. We'll be working to do it again for our 4th year. Getting producers out to look at different management practices on different farms across the county, and school lessons. We've been getting into some of the schools and talking about different types of conservation projects that are going on, and just trying to get young individuals interested in conservation. Touched a little bit on this earlier, watershed partnerships. So we're actively engaged in the 4 watershed partnerships that the county has, so is Pine County. the Nemadji watershed, and just a couple highlights on what we're doing in those. We're working with Carlton SWCD and Carlton County to create the budget for the third biennium, so they're starting their third round of funding. We're wrapping up a wetland restoration near Nickerson, the district is, so we're working on just some final paperwork to get some of that payment out to folks. The Kettle Upper St. Croix watershed, it's about 7 months into the first biennial budget. We're doing a lot of planning and preparing for implementation projects, so there's a lot of outreach going on. There's some studies that are being done. For example, there's going to be an internal lake assessment and alum feasibility study for Pine and Big Pine Lakes. Pine Lake is just on the Aiken side and Big Pine straddles the boundary, but they're pretty interconnected. It makes sense to do the study together. The Snake watershed, we're about a year into the first biennial budget. We're working on implementing a few forestry projects in that watershed. And there are a few other things, again, working on developing and gaining landowner interest for project implementation. Lower St. Croix, we just started the biennial budget and we just received $45,000 from that partnership for soil health practices in the Lower St. Croix portion of Pine County, which that entails anything from no-till practices, strip-till, cover crops, rotational grazing, nutrient management plans. Looking beyond in 2025 and beyond, we've already contracted 7 projects for 2025. 4 forestry projects, a shoreline, hillside restoration, a pollinator planting, and an egg practice, an agricultural, it's a cover crop, I believe, practice. 3 outreach events planned so far. A forestry workshop that we're going to be doing in conjunction with the Kettle Upper St. Croix watershed in Moose Lake in May. Migratory Bird Day, which I had mentioned before, and our Cookout on the Farm event we're currently planning for probably early August. We're also going to be planning with the Lower St. Croix watershed, a bus tour of the Lower St. Croix portion of our county. More information is going to be coming on that soon, but we're again planning sometime in August. That's to get folks, county commissioners like yourself, local and state representatives out to look at what these watershed dollars are actually doing and how impactful they are. Not just to conservation, but for the producers who are implementing these practices. Looking beyond 2025, we're again looking at increasing our staff. We're working on the creation and feasibility of 2 additional staff positions. Would be an education and outreach individual who that would be their full-time job working on that, as well as a lead technician or a project coordinator. As we're starting to increase the amount of projects we're doing, the workload to administer those successfully is also increasing. Currently, we identified the need is there, identifying the financial feasibility for it. We're working on it, but in the next 2 to 5 years, our hope is to have 2 more positions hired if things are going well. Economic forecasts, which was talked about earlier, may play a role in if that's going to happen or not, but we're watching and looking at that carefully. Watershed planning and funding will be critical for the success of all soil and water conservation districts statewide going into the future. That's the way that the state seems to be gearing how soil and water districts are going to operate, is through these watershed plans. And that's where the majority of the money for conservation is going at a state level. So we'll continue to adapt and adjust as those funds continue to be made available to us. And then continued support from you guys, Pine County, is also critical for our continued success. We're always extremely grateful for the financial contributions you guys make to us, but also the in-kind services of office space, IT, everything, is extremely grateful. It's a huge part of the reason why we've been successful the last few years. So I don't have a whole heck of a lot else. Like I said, I just wanted to come and provide an update for you guys and allow an opportunity to answer any questions you might have.
All right, anybody got any questions?
Yeah, I just got one, Paul. You said there was a study, and it's on your page of project
Yeah.
accomplishments. I guess if you could email me, the study, the information where it says for every $1 spent on conservation,
Yeah.
$1.81, I just like.
I can send that. We do have a form and, our state association may have more information and I can get that to you as well.
That'd be great. I'd love to look at that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just, Paul, you made a mention on the shift to the watershed-based planning.
Mhm.
And SWCDs follow boundaries of counties, not watersheds. Is there any discussion about doing any realignment so that rather than, Pine being in, say, 5 watersheds, you might get responsibility for like 2 or 3 watersheds that are in Pine County, and Carlton or Isani or someone else would pick up primary responsibility?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to kind of transitioning soil and water districts to watershed-based.
I didn't, watershed-based, yes.
Watershed-based organizations. I know initially, I don't know, 15 years ago, when this idea for watershed plans first came into existence at the state level, there was some conversation of like, is that the way we should do this? They ultimately decided on having joint power agreements for either an entity or a collaborative, how we are operating now. I don't know if there's any current conversation of that, but that's kind of something that's always in the background, is the long-term future of soil and water districts. Are we going to have the Kettle Upper St. Croix watershed soil and water district versus the Pine Soil and Water Conservation District? But right now there is no conversations to move that way, but it is a thought that has kind of been floated a few times.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, David and Paul, for that, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
We had those discussions, I think, when the Lower St. Croix was first formulated about what are we doing here with these watershed districts? Because what we're doing is, in essence, creating another layer of government
Process.
And so there's our local water, soil and water districts gonna be able to absorb all this workload that's gonna come back. And I was concerned about Pine County because we're in 4. Here in Chisago County, you're in 1 watershed district, so there's a difference. So are we gonna be able to extract enough administrative money out of these watershed districts to keep Pine County soil and water
Functional.
on a functioning basis?
Yeah, and that's something that we talk about a lot, and something that I'm in conversation with our state association, the Board of Water and Soil Resources on. We have seen a very large influx of money for planning, for implementation, for practices. Some of that has staff capacity association with it, but the amount of funding and the amount of resources for staff is coming in at a much different rate than for these projects. So that capacity issue is something that we're very aware of at our district, and many districts are cognitive of that. Again, trying to grow the district to keep up with the demand and the funding that's being dumped on us, and the additional responsibilities that are coming with that is a challenge. And it's something that we're working on, and it's something I think most districts are working on. If we're doing it right or wrong, I don't know. There's not a lot of guidance out right now, but it is a conversation I'm having with some of our state partners and agencies. I think it's an example of the legislation and the legislators identifying the soil and water districts as a great avenue to deliver a lot of this stuff and giving us all this responsibility and money, but not realizing that a lot of districts, I would say even 5 years ago, the average size of staff was probably 4 across the state. And to go from budgets of $200,000 to $400,000 to now $8 to $3 million, depending on which district you're talking about, that's a lot to handle. So it's something that we're paying attention to and trying to keep up with. And again, working with our state agencies to make that a reality that, you know, yeah, these are all great things, but we can't deliver it if we don't have staff who are able to work successfully, so.
Sounds good. Any other questions for Paul?
Thanks.
Well, thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
All right, we'll move on to commissioner updates, Central Minnesota Council on Aging.
They had a meeting with, Senator Klobuchar a couple weeks ago. Pat Meacham will give a report on that meeting at our COW meeting,
Okay,
and, anyway.
sounds good. Minnesotans for the American Community Survey Annual Meeting with Representative Stauber's office.
I logged on to that. I had to get some advice from David because I could not remember the acronym or the name of the meeting. Threw me completely for a loop. But anyway, it has to do with the census. And there's this organization about that is worried about the census, and it worked out of Senator or Congressman Stauber's office. So I zoomed into the meeting and said my piece. I'm not sure exactly what I said, but I think conveyed the message that it's important that when we somehow can convey the message when it's time for the next census, that everybody gets counted, because we're sitting on this fence all the time of we lose just a few people here and there. We lose a congressional seat in Minnesota, which can translate to money for a poverty-stricken county, and that could result in a lot of money. So I think we're all concerned about that everybody gets counted.
And Mr. Chair, and Steve, if I can just add a little expansion on that, if I recall, because I went to the meeting like 2 years ago, but they are also interested in the American Community Survey, which is an annual instrument that goes to a very limited number of homes. And I believe the number is 3 million. And there's a concern that if that number is reduced to save money, that the sample size will be small enough that it won't be accurate for rural areas. So if you're a county of a population of 30,000 like Pine, or if you're a county like, I don't know, maybe Cook has maybe 5,000 people, you won't have enough surveys in your population to even register. And so would be a huge impact on the service delivery as the distribution is figured.
I think that was the big concern out of this meeting too, is that you take one of our smaller counties and even Pine County at 30,000 people. If you extrapolate that out, they're probably calling, what, 4 or 5 people in Pine County to do a survey.
Yeah, and so as your sample size decreases, your confidence interval decreases.
To get the valid read on Pine County. What 4 people they talk to.
Mm-hmm. All right, East Central Solid Waste.
Oh, boy, I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
Yes, we had a meeting. I think the big news is that our director is gonna retire soon, very soon. So we thought we had a process lined up. We took a step back probably, and we're going to open that position up. So if somebody knows somebody that wants to be a solid waste manager, we have a position. So we're gonna hopefully move that process along rather quickly, and hopefully we can find what we need.
Okay. East Central Regional Library.
Sure. Maybe just a couple things out of the last meeting. One, we had a couple vehicles that needed to be replaced, actually. They chose to, after, it was quite a lengthy discussion in the last couple of meetings. decided to do a lease. And going through Chisago County, because they apparently lease a lot of their vehicles, and so that was a decision there. It was an interesting discussion, because we don't do leasing that I'm aware of per se, but Chisago County relies on it almost exclusively, other than their dump trucks or something like that. So that was interesting. The last thing that came out of that was, it was scheduled that we have I guess it was the Budget Committee Commissioners talking about the Joint Powers Agreement, which has not been talked about for a while, and of course has not been changed for 18 years or something like that. And there's a reason why, because the process to change that is I don't know what the word to use.
It's difficult.
Yeah, you need a unanimous decision, not only amongst the 6 commissioners, but you need agreement by all 6 county boards as well to change that. So I think it was a good discussion, because, for some that, maybe didn't understand the whole process, realize if there's if you don't like that, it's pretty difficult to change. But the venue, if you've got some financial issues, it's the budget process that only takes 4 commissioners rather than 6, change and adjust that. So I think that was helpful, and we're going to continue. Maybe there will be some language changes, but I think the message from some of the other counties were they're concerned about the budget as well. So it was interesting to hear that from other counties.
All right, thank you. Soil and water.
I did not attend.
All right. Cattle, Upper St. Croix, one watershed, one plan.
Yeah, it was a general meeting going through the planning and budgeting and stuff like that. So the Pine County Township Officers Meeting is coming up, and Paul's gonna attend, because we always have a big discussion on outreach to the people and what's gonna be available through the watershed plan. So Paul's gonna be there for that too, and I don't know if I'm gonna be there yet, but so Paul's gonna be there and have some comments on that. And then we had a discussion about the Big Pine Lake that he was talking about there, that we have part of it, but the main chunk of the lake and the water runs this way. And that phosphorus study, so we're gonna include both lakes in that, on that phosphorus study. And then there's always talk about the funding that's gonna be, because the state has a budget too, but so we pressed, the Bowser rep was online, and she looked it up, and there's 90 million sitting in the next biennium that's marked for the one watershed, the plans across the things. Other than that, it was just pretty much a general meeting, because we're moving some projects forward.
Okay. All right, Pine County Chemical Health.
Dave and Reese were there, but I thought it was a good, we only meet every other month, but there's always valuable information that comes out of that meeting, even though I've just been on it a short time to see, what we're using those opioid funds for. I think there's a lot of good things going there. Maybe we're ahead of, the impression I got is we're ahead of a lot of counties on using it in various ways and not sticking it just into one big program or something. That lots of small things to try to change the culture of our, of our community regarding, opioids and drug use and other substance abuses. Maybe the one thing that I did see, and it's reflected in the minutes, but the fact that in Pine there was a large presentation about people that are coming out of treatment, and just kind of a survey of that, and it seemed that survey of people that were in treatment, methamphetamine is still really high in Pine County as far as the go-to treatment or the go-to drug as far as, substance abuse. And so and that's been an ongoing issue, but it just seems that, it may not have the headlines per se, that some other things, but it is still, highly prevalent and, we just gotta work through that, I guess, so.
Okay. Central Minnesota Jobs and Training, Joint Powers Board.
That might have been mine, and I had three times on my calendar. At 10, 11, and at noon that day. I missed it. Okay.
I'm not laughing at you,
Stay
JJ.
with me.
I know the pain. It's like, they send you a packet this thick and it's like, oh, I'm only in one of those.
Right, so, I gotta talk to Ryan after and see if it's just something with the calendar here. or-
I think it's something they gotta fix it.
I've been on there once. I filled in for Terry and there are 3 meetings. I think the one you just you can attend them all, but the main one I think is the last one, but
12-15 one.
yeah, I wouldn't talk to Ryan. I would actually contact the Central Minnesota Jobs and Training.
Yeah, tell them,
Director.
I'm only interested in the
Yep.
joint powers.
Gotcha.
Cause I had the same issue, JJ.
All right.
All right.
Excuse me, they had requested, when that information was provided, that all of those meetings. be done.
I know that, but they don't realize how confusing.
Right, right. So, but JJ, if you let me know, I can pull those other ones off.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to do what we have
It's
to
the
do.
joint powers.
Right,
I mean, they are all important meetings. So I
Yeah.
mean, it is something that if you can go to them, there are different things there, but I was just filling in and Terry had said, just go to the last one. Well, I went to all 3 of them and it was a lot of the same stuff, but they are different. So. All right, Lakes and Pines.
Yeah, we had a meeting yesterday. I think probably the one thing that came out of it is, when you hear about these federal cuts or pauses or whatever, it affects sometimes us. And so what happened, there's a program over there called weatherization. And the people that qualify for fuel assistance, one of the requirements is let's see how efficient your house is. And so that's a big part of that fuel assistance program is to weatherize your house. Well, the funding it's a federally funded project and there's a pause put on that. There's no cushion of money, so they laid off. They only got 2 crews and they had to lay one off at the beginning of March. So we'll see how deep that goes, but it makes an effect on what they're trying to do. That the rest of the stuff is pretty much going on.
All right. Anybody have any other meetings they attended? Okay, is there anything other to come before the board? Otherwise, take a look at your upcoming meetings and a lot of stuff on there. And we'll declare the meeting.